Most men assume that declining energy, reduced drive, and changes in vitality are simply an unavoidable consequence of getting older, something that happens naturally with time, and that there is very little they can do about it beyond accepting the situation or turning to pharmaceutical interventions. But what if that assumption is fundamentally flawed? And what if centuries of traditional wisdom, combined with modern scientific research, are pointing us towards something far more accessible, far more natural, and far more powerful than most people realize? Because today, we are going to talk about a drink that has been consumed for over 1,000 years across North Africa and the Middle East. A drink that men in those cultures have long associated with vitality, energy, and overall male wellness. A drink that you can find in virtually any grocery store in the world, and a drink that recently caught the attention of researchers who decided to put its traditional reputation to the test in a controlled scientific setting with genuinely remarkable results that are worth every man understanding. And that drink is pomegranate juice, the deep crimson, rich, polyphenol-packed fruit beverage that has been pressed by hand at street stalls from Marrakesh to Cairo for centuries. And I want to take you through not just what the research found, but why it found it, how pomegranate works inside the male body at a biological and cellular level, what systems it supports, why those systems matter so deeply for male health and performance, and why the modern lifestyle is working against every single one of those systems every single day, without most men even realizing it. Because once you understand the full picture, the connection between this ancient drink and male wellness stops sounding like folklore and starts sounding like exactly what it is, which is science. So let me start by taking you back to that Queen Margaret University study, because this is where the conversation gets really interesting. Researchers recruited approximately 60 healthy male participants, ranging in age from 21 to 64 years old, which is a broad and meaningful age range that represents a large cross-section of adult men. And the protocol was beautifully simple. Participants consumed 500 milliliters of pomegranate juice per day for a duration of 2 weeks, which works out to roughly 2 cups of juice daily. Nothing else was changed dramatically about their lifestyle or their diet. And at the beginning of the study, researchers measured a variety of health markers, and then 2 weeks later, they measured those same markers again to see what had changed. And the results were striking, because on average, the participants showed a 24% increase in testosterone levels over just those 2 weeks, which is a substantial and meaningful shift that represents roughly 1/4 improvement in one of the most important hormonal markers of male health. And the benefits did not stop there, because participants also showed measurable reductions in cortisol levels, the hormone most closely associated with chronic stress. And they demonstrated improvements in mood, which makes complete biological sense when you understand the relationship between cortisol and testosterone. And they also showed improvements in blood pressure readings, which is a cardiovascular marker that speaks to the broader health of the vascular system. And it is important to be honest and transparent about what this study does and does not tell us, because the study was relatively small in terms of participant numbers. It was short in duration at just 2 weeks, and the participants were healthy men without diagnosed hormonal conditions or metabolic diseases. So the conclusion here is not that pomegranate juice is a cure for any specific medical condition, or that it will produce dramatic pharmaceutical-level interventions in men with serious underlying health issues. But what the study does powerfully demonstrate is something that traditional cultures around the world have understood for millennia, which is that food is the original medicine, and that the compounds found in whole, natural, nutrient-dense foods can meaningfully support and optimize the biological environments and systems that govern how men feel, function, and perform. And that is a message worth repeating and worth understanding deeply, because so many men today have been conditioned to think that the only real solutions to hormonal or performance concerns are pharmaceutical ones, when in reality, the foundational environment in which those systems operate is built day by day through food, sleep, stress management, and movement. And pomegranate is one of the most compelling examples of a food that supports that environment at multiple levels simultaneously. So now let us talk about why, because understanding the mechanism is just as important as knowing the outcome. And to do that, we need to briefly understand the three systems that govern male vitality and performance, because these three systems must all be functioning well and working together. And if any one of them breaks down or becomes impaired, the entire system suffers. And the three systems are the hormonal system, the vascular or blood flow system, and the neurological system. And pomegranate has been shown to have meaningful interactions with all three, which is extraordinarily rare for any single dietary compound, and goes a long way toward explaining why this fruit has such a distinguished history in traditional medicine across so many cultures. So let us start with the hormonal system, which centers primarily on testosterone, the primary male sex hormone that drives libido, motivation, energy, muscle maintenance, bone density, and the activation of androgen receptors throughout the body. Testosterone is the foundational signal that tells the brain and body that a man is vital, healthy, and functioning well. And without adequate testosterone levels, the brain simply does not send strong signals related to drive and motivation, which is why men with lower testosterone often report not just reduced physical performance, but also reduced mood, reduced confidence, and a general sense of flatness or disconnection from the things that used to motivate them. And here is where pomegranate comes in at the hormonal level, because deep inside the male body in the testes, there are specialized cells called Leydig cells. And these are the cells that are primarily responsible for producing testosterone. And Leydig cells are remarkably sensitive to something called oxidative stress, which is essentially cellular damage caused by an imbalance between free radicals and the body's ability to neutralize them with antioxidants. And the modern environment is absolutely saturated with sources of oxidative stress, including poor dietary choices, processed and ultra-processed foods, environmental toxins and pollutants, chronic psychological stress, sedentary behavior, insufficient sleep, and exposure to various chemicals in plastics and other consumer products, all of which create a cellular environment in which Leydig cells are constantly under assault and therefore less capable of producing testosterone efficiently and consistently. And this is where the polyphenols in pomegranate become so significant, because pomegranate is extraordinarily rich in powerful antioxidant compounds, including punicalagins and punicic acid and anthocyanins and ellagic acid, and a broad spectrum of other polyphenolic compounds that have been shown in research to be among the most potent antioxidants found in any commonly consumed food. And these compounds are able to neutralize free radicals, reduce oxidative stress, and create a more protected and favorable cellular environment for Leydig cell function, meaning that with less oxidative damage, the Leydig cells can do their job more effectively and produce testosterone more efficiently, which aligns perfectly with the results seen in the Queen Margaret University study, where testosterone levels increased meaningfully over just 2 weeks of daily consumption. And now let us move to the second system, which is the vascular system, or blood flow. And this is where things get particularly fascinating from a mechanistic standpoint, because the polyphenols in pomegranate do not just act as antioxidants in a general sense. They have a very specific and well-studied interaction with the endothelial cells that line the interior walls of blood vessels throughout the body. And these endothelial cells are responsible for producing a molecule called nitric oxide, which is arguably one of the most important signaling molecules in the entire vascular system, because nitric oxide acts as a vasodilator, meaning it causes the smooth muscle cells in blood vessel walls to relax, which allows the vessels to expand and widen, which in turn dramatically increases the volume of blood that can flow through them at any given moment. And this mechanism of nitric oxide-driven vasodilation is the fundamental biological basis for healthy circulation and vascular performance in men. And the pomegranate polyphenols support this system by activating an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which is abbreviated as ENOS. And as its name suggests, this is the enzyme responsible for synthesizing or producing nitric oxide within the endothelial cells. So when pomegranate polyphenols activate eNOS, the result is increased nitric oxide production, which leads to relaxation of arterial walls, improved blood flow, and better vascular function throughout the body. And this is not just relevant for cardiovascular health in a general sense, but is directly connected to male performance and function, because adequate blood flow is an absolutely essential component of male sexual function, because the physical mechanics of male arousal depend entirely on the ability of blood vessels to dilate and allow sufficient blood volume to flow into erectile tissue. And if the endothelial cells are damaged or dysfunctional, or if nitric oxide production is impaired, which is exactly what happens with chronic oxidative stress and inflammation and poor diet and lack of exercise, then circulation is compromised and performance suffers regardless of what testosterone levels may be doing, which is why so many experts in men's health emphasize that this is not simply a hormonal issue, but a vascular one. And it is also why pomegranate is such a compelling dual-action food, because it supports both the hormonal and the vascular aspects of male wellness simultaneously through different but complementary mechanisms. And now let us address the third system, which is the neurological system, because the brain and nervous system play a critical and often underappreciated role in male health and performance, because the signal for arousal, motivation, and physical response does not begin in the body, it begins in the brain. And for that signal to be strong and consistent, the brain needs to be in a state of relative calm and safety, rather than a state of chronic threat and stress, because the body's stress response system, governed by the hormone cortisol and the sympathetic nervous system, is fundamentally incompatible with relaxation, connection, and sexual function. And this is not a moral judgment or a psychological observation. It is basic biology, because when cortisol levels are high, the body is in survival mode. Resources are diverted to systems that help the body fight or flee from perceived threats, and systems associated with reproduction and pleasure and connection are deprioritized. And additionally, cortisol has a direct biochemical antagonistic relationship with testosterone, meaning that chronically elevated cortisol actively suppresses testosterone production by interfering with the hormonal signaling cascade that tells the Leydig cells to produce testosterone. So stress is not just a psychological inconvenience for men. It is a direct hormonal and physiological threat to male vitality. And this is why the finding in the pomegranate study that cortisol levels were reduced alongside the increase in testosterone is so meaningful. Because those two findings are directly connected, when cortisol comes down, testosterone has more room to rise. And the polyphenols and other bioactive compounds in pomegranate appear to support this process by reducing systemic oxidative stress and inflammation, which are primary drivers of the chronic stress response in the body. And when the body experiences less oxidative burden and less inflammatory signaling, the nervous system can shift more readily into a parasympathetic state, which is the rest and restore mode that is associated with calm, connection, improved mood, and all of the neurological conditions that support healthy male function. And the study participants reported improved mood alongside their hormonal changes, which is entirely consistent with this mechanism, and which also speaks to the quality of life benefits that extend well beyond any single narrow measure of male performance. And now that we understand how pomegranate works across all three of these critical systems, I want to talk about why this matters so much in the context of the modern world. Because the question worth asking is not just whether pomegranate can support male wellness. The more important question is why so many men today are struggling with energy, vitality, drive, and overall hormonal health at younger and younger ages. And the honest answer is that the modern lifestyle is an almost perfectly engineered assault on every single one of the three systems we just discussed, starting with diet. Because the modern food environment is dominated by ultra-processed foods that are high in refined sugars and industrial seed oils and artificial additives and preservatives, all of which are potent drivers of oxidative stress and systemic inflammation. And those same foods are devoid of the polyphenols and antioxidants and micronutrients that the body needs to maintain healthy endothelial function, protect Leydig cells, and keep cortisol in check. So the dietary foundation that most men are building their health on is actively working against every biological system that supports vitality. And then add to that the pervasive presence of chronic psychological stress in modern life. The financial pressures, the social media comparison culture, the always-on work environment, the blurring of boundaries between professional and personal time, all of which keeps cortisol elevated for extended periods far beyond what the human body was designed to handle. And then consider the role of sleep deprivation, because research consistently shows that the majority of testosterone production in men occurs during deep sleep, particularly during the rapid eye movement cycles of the night. And men who consistently sleep fewer than 7 or 8 hours per night show significantly reduced testosterone production compared to those who sleep adequately. And yet, chronic sleep deprivation has become almost a cultural badge of honor in many professional environments, with men treating their need for sleep as a weakness to be overcome, rather than a biological necessity to be respected. And then there is the sedentary nature of modern life, because the human body evolved for regular physical movement and resistance activity, and the mechanical stress placed on muscles and bones through exercise is one of the primary triggers for testosterone production and anabolic hormone signaling. And a population that spends the majority of its waking hours seated at desks, or in cars or on couches, is a population that is systematically depriving itself of one of the most powerful natural testosterone-supporting stimuli that exists. And finally, there is the issue of environmental toxins, including endocrine disruptors found in plastics, pesticides, household cleaning products, personal care products, and countless other everyday items that men come into contact with regularly, many of which have been shown to interfere with hormonal signaling and mimic or block the action of androgens in the body. And when you add all of these factors together, you get a picture of a modern environment that is simultaneously flooding the body with oxidative stress, keeping cortisol chronically elevated, damaging endothelial cells and reducing nitric oxide production, disrupting sleep and therefore testosterone production, removing the movement stimuli that support anabolic hormones, and bombarding the endocrine system with chemical interference from multiple directions. And against that backdrop, the fact that traditional cultures who consumed whole foods like pomegranate and lived with lower chronic stress and more physical activity and cleaner environments had better outcomes for male vitality is not surprising at all. It is entirely predictable, and the lesson is not that we need to recreate every aspect of a pre-modern lifestyle, but that we need to be much more intentional about the choices we make within the modern environment, prioritizing the foods and habits and practices that support our biological systems rather than undermining them. And pomegranate is a beautiful and accessible example of a food that supports multiple systems simultaneously. And while 2 cups of pomegranate juice every day may or may not be practical or affordable for every person, the broader principle is that building a diet rich in polyphenol-containing foods, which includes not just pomegranate, but also berries of all kinds, dark chocolate with a high cacao content, red grapes, beets, leafy green vegetables, and a wide variety of colorful plant foods, creates a dietary foundation that supports endothelial health, antioxidant protection for Leydig cells, anti-inflammatory signaling throughout the body, and neurological conditions that favor parasympathetic calm rather than chronic sympathetic stress response. And when you combine that dietary foundation with adequate and consistent sleep, regular physical activity, including both cardiovascular exercise and resistance training, effective stress management practices, and reduction of exposure to known endocrine-disrupting chemicals where possible, you are no longer fighting against your own biology, but working with it, giving your body the inputs and the environment it needs to function as it was designed to function. And the results of doing that consistently over time are exactly what cultures around the world have understood intuitively for centuries, and what modern research is now confirming with growing precision and detail, which is that the human body has a remarkable capacity to support its own health and vitality when given the right conditions, and that natural dietary compounds from whole foods can meaningfully optimize those conditions in ways that are measurable, reproducible, and biologically logical. And so the message today is not that any single food or drink is a magic solution or a pharmaceutical-level intervention, but rather that the cumulative impact of consistently choosing foods that are rich in bioactive compounds, that support antioxidant defense, that promote nitric oxide production, that reduce systemic inflammation, and that create a hormonal environment favorable to testosterone and unfavorable to excess cortisol, that cumulative impact is very real and very meaningful. And pomegranate is one of the most compelling single foods to add to that dietary strategy, both because of its impressive polyphenol density and because of the specific mechanisms through which those polyphenols interact with the 3 systems most central to male vitality. And if you have never tried fresh pomegranate juice or added pomegranate seeds to your diet regularly, then this is an excellent and very low-risk place to start, because the downside is essentially zero, and the potential upside, based on both traditional wisdom and modern research, is genuinely significant. And if you want to go deeper on how to optimize blood flow and support nitric oxide production through diet and lifestyle, then there are resources available that walk through exactly what to eat and what habits to prioritize step by step, because erections and male vitality are not mysterious or random outcomes. They are the predictable result of systems that are either being supported or undermined by the choices we make every single day. And understanding that is the first and most important step toward changing those outcomes in a meaningful and lasting way.